Hey guys, welcome to the Max Invest YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be discussing the Ethereum roadmap. Now, a couple of days ago, Vitalik Buterin did a post about Ethereum's roadmap, and I thought it would be worth doing a video to actually update you guys about where Ethereum is going, how it's going there, and how it plans to scale. So, if you enjoy the video, remember to like and subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord channel, and remember, nothing in this video is financial advice. So let's get into the video. The first thing that I actually want to do is I want to give people who are a little bit behind a bit of a recap on how Ethereum is scaling. Essentially, the main way that Ethereum is scaling is by rollups. What a rollup does is it will compute the transactions off-chain, and then it will post a proof of this computation to the main chain. Now, this means that the rollup will sit on top of the layer 1. It will inherit Ethereum's consensus, decentralization, and security. However, it should be very fast and very cheap. Essentially, what Ethereum is doing is we're using the rollups as the interface layer. All users will eventually be on rollups and off the layer 1. Currently, we're in a bit of a weird phase where people are still on the layer 1, and we don't want that to happen in the future. The fees on the layer 1 will go up forever. However, the fees on the rollups should come down, and they should be very, very cheap to use. Another important thing to note is that when a rollup is settling on the layer 1, which is Ethereum, it must do two things. Now, this is also specifically in the case of zero-knowledge rollups. Essentially, what the rollup will do is they'll post a proof that the transaction computation actually happened to the execution layer. Now, after the rollup's done this, it needs to do one more thing. And what the rollup needs to do is it needs to post the transaction data of the computation in a compressed form down to the layer 1 as well. So all of the different data, the cool data from the transactions, must also be posted onto the layer 1 in a compressed form. Now, this makes for a few different types of solutions where you can actually get validiums and volitions which post proofs down to the layer 1, however they store the transaction data themselves, and there's a bunch of cool stuff that can come out with this. So, let's talk about the first aspect of Ethereum's roadmap. Essentially, this part of Ethereum's roadmap started earlier in 2021, and it's going to extend out into mid-2022. Now, what this part of Ethereum's roadmap is the roll-up aspect of the roadmap. Essentially, in the early part of this year and the middle of this year, we started actually seeing roll-ups deploy. And at the end of August, we saw Arbitrum deploy. Now, Arbitrum is a generalized optimistic rollup. Essentially, you can go onto Arbitrum and you can actually use the rollup with fees that are below $5 right now. Arbitrum has a lot of applications on it, and it is a very, very good solution. However, I do want to say that this part will probably extend into mid-2022, and the reason for this is because Arbitrum is missing a few things right now, and so are some other rollups. Essentially, Arbitrum is controlled by a multi-signature wallet, which still means it's got its training wheels on right now, and it's a little bit centralized. Also, Arbitrum has centralized sequences, and there aren't that many centralized exchanges that allow you to bridge into Arbitrum. Of course, once we start seeing all of these issues get solved and these issues clear up, we get a very, very good rollup. So, I believe that by the middle of 2022, we're going to see some really good rollups that are fully inheriting Ethereum's security and decentralization. Of course, optimistic rollups are going to come first because they're a little bit easier. However, zero-knowledge rollups will probably be late 2022 to early 2023, where we can start seeing the exact same thing with these ZK rollups. So, this is the first part of Ethereum's roadmap, and in my opinion, this will probably get us to about 1,000 transactions per second, which is essentially double any other chain right now. You may think other chains like Solana do 50,000 transactions per second. However, this is all marketing, and I probably will explain why this is marketing in a later video. Now, the next thing that I want to discuss that is going to be happening on Ethereum's roadmap is going to be in mid-2022. Essentially, this is the merge to proof of stake. Now, this is planned for June or July in 2022, and I do expect this to play out around that time. Essentially, what is going to happen is Ethereum's proof of work consensus mechanism is going to be eliminated, and Ethereum will switch to proof of stake. In a proof of work consensus, you need your computer solving hard maths problems in order to produce blocks. Of course, this wastes a lot of energy, and it is quite inefficient in my opinion. Proof of work has a bunch of downsides to it. One other big downside that I can think of is essentially, miners of Ethereum need to pay a lot of money for hardware to actually mine Ether. However, once they mine that Ether, they need to sell the Ether in order to recover these hardware costs, and in my opinion, this leads to a lot of dumping of Ethereum, which isn't a good sign. Now, proof of stake essentially aligns the stakers a lot more with the actual network. The stakers in proof of stake are people who believe in the Ethereum network. They put their money up in order to process transactions, and they get money back in return. I do like proof of stake a lot better, and it's going to do a lot of different things. Now, another big positive of proof of stake is it's going to drop Ethereum's issuance. Right now, Ethereum is issuing at about 3% every year, which means it's inflationary. However, once proof of stake drops, Ethereum will be deflationary. Of course, this is because proof of stake is going to be paired with EIP 1559, and what this means is more Ethereum is actually going to be burned than is issued, which is going to be very good for the network in my opinion, and it adds some very, very sustainable tokenomics to Ether. So, the merge is one of the upgrades that I am the most excited about. However, there's one quick side note that I want to say, and a lot of people believe the merge is going to reduce fees. However, this is not the case. Ethereum's proof of stake merge will not reduce fees whatsoever. It doesn't change the layer 1, and we're scaling solely via layer 2. Now, the next big thing that I want to discuss is what will be happening in early 2023, and this is something that Vitalik Buterin recently proposed in his blog post. Essentially, Vitalik Buterin said that we can actually do cool data expansion. Vitalik Buterin proposed a new EIP called EIP 4488 in order to actually get this done. Now, if you remember, back at the beginning of the video, I discussed cool data. Essentially, cool data is something that a rollup will need to post down to the main chain. If we expand cool data, we're essentially meaning that more cool data can be fitted into existing blocks. And what this means is it's going to be easier for computers to actually process cool data, which should reduce the cost of rollups by 5 times, which is absolutely massive. However, the adverse effect of this is that it may make Ethereum slightly more centralized. Essentially, this is going to mean that the existing computers are going to need to process more process more in a quicker amount of time, which will essentially make ETH a bit more centralized. However, in my opinion, this is a bit of a non-issue, and the reason for this is because most blocks will not be filled with maximum cool data, and the other reason for this is as computers get better, the chains are able to slowly raise the gas limit and make blocks a little bit bigger. Because computers will get better, it makes the chain easier to run, so the chain can actually be improved upon a little bit. This is a bit confusing and I won't go into it too much more. Now, in 2023, a huge upgrade is coming to Ethereum, and this is called data sharding. Essentially, the main purpose of data sharding is to split up the work of doing the computation for all of that cool data that the rollups post down to the layer 1. Now, a common misconception is that data sharding is going to reduce the layer 1 fees. However, this is not the case. Essentially, data sharding is being implemented in order to reduce the fees on layer 2s. Data sharding is basically there to make it easier to process cool data and make the network a little bit more efficient. All it does is it splits up the work of doing the computation between all of these different validators because it continues to add shards. In 2023, we're quite likely to only see a small number of shards. About 4 shards would probably be appropriate. However, in the future we'll get more and more, and eventually up to 64 shards. Now, a lot of people are saying that we can just continue to add more data shards when is needed, and I do believe this is a continuous improvement for the base layer. The good thing about sharding is that it does not impact decentralization, and this is definitely one of the ways to go. The next big upgrade for Ethereum is going to be happening in 2024 and beyond. Essentially, this upgrade is going to be statelessness. Right now, every time someone syncs an Ethereum node from Genesis, they need to essentially download all of the data in Ethereum's entire history. Essentially, every time you're running a validator node, you actually need to be able to see all of Ethereum's historical data. What statelessness does is it means that specific nodes can choose not to see all of this data. They won't need to download all of the historical data, and they'll only need to download the new data to keep in sync with the chain. What this is going to do is it's going to make it a lot easier for individuals to run validator nodes, and it should make Ethereum more decentralized. There have already been a lot of big EIPs that have been proposed on this, such as EIP 4444. And essentially what this EIP is doing is it's allowing individuals to only actually validate the top of the chain. So this definitely is a lot like statelessness and weak statelessness. Now, of course, if you have individuals that are only validating and coming to consensus on the front end of the chain, who is going to store all of the historical data? Because the big positive of Ethereum is that individuals can actually see everything that's happened in the past, and it's an immutable base layer. However, there are a lot of ways to store all of this data. The first big way is there's protocols like the Graph, which store all of Ethereum's data and they index it in an easy to understand way. Of course, there's also going to be roll-up DAOs and individuals and institutions that will volunteer to store this data. In my opinion, there will be tons of people that are storing this data, and if an individual ever wants to sync the entire chain with from Genesis, they'll be able to do this quite easy because we have a lot of people who are willing to store the data. Now, the next thing that is quite speculative that could be coming in 2024 is data availability sampling. Now, I must confess, this is quite a difficult one to understand. However, with data availability sampling, what you can do is you can actually verify the data availability on the chain without downloading the entire data of the chain. So you only need to download a small amount of the chain to actually verify the whole thing, which will of course mean that the chain is going to be able to be a lot more scalable, as individuals don't need to use all of that extra computational power. Definitely something to look forward to. Now, what's going to be happening in 2025 onwards? And in my opinion, there won't be too many major changes from 2025 on for the Ethereum network. Instead, it'll just be incremental changes. Essentially, as computers get better over time, Ethereum will be able to continuously raise the gas limit. This is probably something that will happen relatively infrequently. However, it will definitely happen as computers get better. Now, the second thing that will probably happen is snarkifying the base layer. This one is unbelievably confusing, but all this really means is it's compressing all of the data on the base layer even more. This is sort of similar to Vitalik Buterin's proposal for EIP 4488, where it just compresses data further on the base layer. Now, statelessness can always be furthered, and there can be continuous upgrades, and of course, shards can be added. And if Ethereum continues to go down this road, what it is doing is it's optimizing the base layer for layer 2s to go on top of it. And in my opinion, Ethereum will be able to handle the entirety of global transactions. My future for Ethereum is that I can actually see everything eventually being settled on top of Ethereum. I can see a roll-up-centric ecosystem on top of Ethereum, most of these other chains actually becoming roll-ups, and everything being settled down to Ethereum eventually. Of course, if you disagree with me, I would like to have my perspective challenged, and you can do that in the Discord channel, which is in the description below. Anyway, this brings us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, remember to like and subscribe to the channel. We're going for 1,000 subscribers, and it would be much appreciated if you could help out. Thanks for watching the video.